Our boy is back and better than ever in his very own cinematic installment of The Walking Dead, following in the footsteps of Negan and Maggie, who received their own series just a couple months back.
Good times.
And while that show was bolstered by the personal animosity and tensions surrounding its two leads, this one takes a step back and drops our man of the hour into a whole new land, surrounded by new threats, new friends, and new environments that are all foreign to the universe of The Walking Dead. A show that seemed destined to essentially stick around in America has now sought to become more involved and explore other regions of the world. Whilst presenting new ideologies, beliefs, alliances, and dangers that could play into the inevitable conclusion of this universe's journey. I had reservations about the series initially, simply due to its location and the fact that it was just solely focused on Daryl, with no other recognisable faces joining this excursion overseas. But in just 1 hour, the team behind this managed to quash my concerns.
Oh, thank goodness!
And present a whole new world of possibilities with consequences all around for our intrepid hero, and seeing Daryl having to go it alone draws up so many potential moments for him to let loose, as we see a few times throughout this one, without the need to hold back, as the stakes are higher than ever, with his salvation coming from one objective: to be the Mandalorian.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
This one opens with Daryl washing ashore in Marseille, where he quickly catches his bearings and finds a few pieces of equipment and resources to bring his health bar back to full. And a day later, he begins to traverse the harsh landscapes of the war-torn, dilapidated France, where he encounters a small nest of walker variants called burners, on account of their burning desire to get to know people.
Comedy.
And after disposing of them, he's left injured and continues until he finds a young woman named Maribel and her grandfather out in the middle of nowhere, who initially present themselves with a pleasant demeanour, quickly turning on him for his stuff though after he saves them from almost being hurt by two men working for a group called the Cause.
Who?
And as Maribel is about to end Daryl, another woman named Isabelle scouted him earlier and scares the pair off, bringing Daryl back with her to her abbey, where she's part of a group of trained nuns known as the Union of Hope. And it's here where he meets Laurent, a young lad who was orphaned and taken in by the nuns at a young age, and has been heralded by the nuns as the coming Messiah, destined to lead humanity back to its renewal. A revelation given to Daryl after he witnesses the boy reciting poems to a reanimated corpse of Pierre Jean, the former priest of the abbey, who they believe can be cured of this someday. Upon finding out what's actually going on here though, Daryl starts to raid their armory for a few supplies to leave, when Isabelle asks him to deliver Laurent to the Union of Paris, based on the prophecy that Laurent drew out that depicts a messenger coming from the oceans in a drawing that resembles Daryl.
You gotta be kidding me.
Daryl of course doesn't believe in this and opts out, but quickly hides when Cadron and his men arrive at the gates of the Union looking for an American, after Cadron finds his brother Michel reanimated following Maribel's strike against him earlier during her meeting with Daryl. But to get away with her life, she puts the blame of his brother's death in the hands of Daryl.
You dick!
Cadron and his men force their way into the abbey to look around and find the reanimated Père Jean, questioning the nun's sensibilities, and Cadron orders one of his men to take the walker out, which is discovered by Laurent, who is almost taken to become part of the Cause when Daryl returns and plays the role of Assassin's Creed.
I'm vengeance.
The nuns take up arms alongside Daryl to rid themselves of Cadron and his men, but all except Isabelle and another survive the onslaught, and it's here where Daryl concedes to support Isabelle's efforts to get Laurent to safety in exchange for her directions to Le Havre in the north of France, where coincidentally is where Daryl's enemies are. And we close this episode on Genet, the leader of the Cause, instructing her forces to track down Daryl after he staged a mutiny on board one of their vessels that was also transporting walkers for experimentation as well as other prisoners.
You know why? Because you, that's why.
So bugger me has this one come out of the gate swinging, with a fascinating insight into the greater schemes going on across the globe, a fresh setting for the long-standing franchise to indulge in, and plenty of mystery afoot for one of The Walking Dead's most beloved characters, centered at the middle of something larger than he might be aware of.
These are dark times, there is no denying.
I thoroughly enjoyed this opening to the Daryl Dixon spin-off, and possibly more than I did for Negan and Maggie's, as it possesses all the quality of Dead City, from its music to visuals to the makeup and the writing, but none of the distractions like we had with Maggie and Negan's tenuous connection. It's a close examination into the mind of Daryl and the reality of his life, the mortality of it, how he should live it, what he should live for, and what he deserves from this point going forward after giving everything for everyone else. And honestly, I know there are people out there who hate seeing this, but I love deconstructing a hero in such a manner to get a peek behind the curtain that fills me with the same degree of joy as seeing another part of Disney crumble.
Beautiful.
Something I need to acknowledge first though is the world building and overall tone to this one, that while it likely isn't in that universe, was a breath of fresh air, finally getting to see the state of things elsewhere on the planet, which shouldn't be a desirable aspect as the location shouldn't matter in a world full of moving corpses, but weirdly is something that many find fascinating, including myself, because anywhere that we haven't seen that sees blood trails or discarded tanks or random personal items like we saw with Daryl in the opening minutes, tends to tell a story and are tangible moments in history that we can only speculate on, as either the person is gone or dead, so you begin to wonder what transpired and how it led them there. It's ultimately another tale of woe and a grim reality that we only see through characters like Daryl.
No, he's got a point.
I love the cold opening with this one, feeling akin to a survival game where you start with fresh resources and have to discover new means of defense and new possibilities within the land before you, making this an honestly incredibly immersive experience.
Fan-fucking-dabby-dozy.
I also love the visual of desperation in this as well when Daryl discovers the map and recordings from the Irishman. Even seeing the destinations marked on the map gives us an idea of how widespread the virus is and that truly nowhere is safe.
It's over. We are screwed.
And within the tone of this too, the presence and weight of death is felt, with Daryl finding the stuffed penguin with the young girl's name on it from the recording and the remains of the family's luggage that acts as a stark reminder to the cold brutality of this universe. Something I think looking back was bizarrely missing from Dead City, where instead they chose to show us the optional displays of violence and domination, whereas this show starts us off with the harsh realities, unpredictable dangers and fragility of human life. Now moving on, the introduction of burners were fucking awesome and a fascinating inclusion that Isabelle implies later on are just one of a few variants within France, that offer a new danger to the characters that encounter them, as you now can't even risk the possibility of getting close to them in case their effect slowly kills you, as we saw with the Nuns try to prevent with Daryl's cauterization. And given how quick the Nuns were to cauterize those wounds, would imply to me that the burns have the same effect as a scratch, adding an unsettling new threat to be on the lookout for, emphasizing that Daryl as well doesn't really understand what's going on out in the rest of the world. But I'm honestly curious how these ones came to be and why they burn as they do. It can't simply be a skin-based thing either, as we saw a few of them spout out a few bits of acidic blood after being killed. Whatever the answer is, maybe something to do with the cause given the walkers we see on Janae's boat by the end, but regardless, I'm excited to see more of this in the show. Next up is the Nuns. I love this idea and what they represent to Daryl as a character, as they possess the very thing that he's lost, and that's faith. Faith that things can be better, faith that Rick and Michonne can be found, faith that he can return home, and faith that he'll make it out of this alive. And aside from the question of his future and the mere existence for him now, my interpretation of this is the story for Daryl centers around believing again.
You gotta have faith, Prime.
And finding the resolve to complete his task without breaking to the pressure that he feels around him, which would give him the catharsis he needs to finally stop. These ideals seem lost to him now though, even though his home is stable, Negan is reformed, the Whisperers are dead, Pamela's incarcerated, and there are clues to Rick's survival. But weirdly, something has knocked it out of him, and it may just be how far away he is from home, but I think there is something deeper and more existential in here. And it may just be how far away from home he is, but I think there's something deeper and more existential here, that in my mind relates to the pressure he puts on himself. So the Nuns taking him in, deeming him the messenger, surrounding him with all the religious iconography and imagery, along with the visual of Daryl drowning in the tub under the weight he feels to almost reawaken from that, was a fantastic representation of a rebirth for him, where you can tell he doesn't want to give up on his mission or lose the hope and faith that he once had, but in his eyes he's become exhausted, his body is worn, and he's starting to lose confidence in his own abilities and plans now. But he's been given a chance at renewal here to find some sense of perseverance once more by getting Laurent to safety, in exchange for his own safe passage off the island, with the thought of finding his family once more and completing a task that's clouded his life since the day that Rick disappeared.
Victory, my dreams are broken. The chains are the easy part. It's what goes on in here that's hard.
And this entire series is now heightened by that tension of will he commit to this or not, as it is his only option to escape, but right now I don't think he sees Laurent and Nuns as his responsibility. But in all honesty, this is just another Judith and Hilltop situation where he just needs to do his thing and be the protector he always has been. The Nuns themselves though are rather lost in their own sensibilities for even thinking that their priest, Perdue, could be restored with poems and prayers, but it comes back to that feeling of faith and having something to believe in. in. However, in that scenario, Daryl is right to call bullshit given he saw how similar Herschel's farm was and knowing that nothing can actually be done. The characters of the Nuns though were just warm bodies for the fight ultimately, but seeing Isabelle and another survive with Laurent and Daryl by the end, it appears we know who our focus belongs to now, and I'm interested to find out more about them as the season goes by. But Isabelle especially has a lot of potential to become a fan favourite, whose resolve is something to be admired already, and the degree of awareness she possesses is something that will be crucial for directing Daryl, even if the intention from this is all based on a fallacy.
You fool.
And just quickly, I love the Union of Hope and how it is an idealistic concept that in reality could work provided people are understanding and supportive of one another's beliefs. But here it's all the same. As Isabelle says, they all believe it's a test and that someday they'll see the end. But until then, everyone is in the same boat, just praying for survival and a better day. And I suppose a mention of our antagonists is worth a glance too, with Cadron and Genet seemingly being set up as Daryl's combatants now, with something sinister lurking behind their intentions here and what's actually going on around France. Cadron's intentions are clear enough given he believes that Daryl was responsible for the death of his brother, and that's just a good bit of muscle for him to go up against as we run through France. But it's clear that there is a little more to discover about Daryl's involvement with Genet and the cause, given his mention of capture and the fact that she wants him back by the end. But the bigger question here is what the cause are doing and why. We see the assortment of walkers at the end, and in the closing trailer we see an array of them displaying behaviours we rarely ever see from them. So right now, my early predictions is these experiments tie into the CRM and what they were doing in Worlds Beyond, experimenting on the walkers and all the potentials that they carry. The cause could be a radical group or an extension of the CRM, but based on the walkers in the trailer, there's another likely avenue, and that's weaponizing them for something more nefarious. And we know that walkers can have other uses as well, as we saw the Croat found by using their decomposition as fuel to power parts of Manhattan and Dead City. So there's potential for the walkers, crawlers, runners, and now burners to be used in other ways, but the question is why and for what? Who knows currently, but those are my thoughts right now at least, that the Walker variants will play into this another way, or at least are a clue to something bigger. But as it is, I am thoroughly excited to see how the series progresses. Taking an intimate look at one of the most treasured members to the legacy of The Walking Dead is something I wanted for a while, and it proved to work extremely well for Negan and Maggie, so now a deliberate look at Daryl should fill a lot of viewers with joy.
You're goddamn right.
The production quality to this, especially in the sets and locations, gets a lot of respect from me. The music is solid, helping to emphasise the tense moments and underline the solemn ones. The burners is something I want to see more of as well. After all, this is The Walking Dead, but I want the writers to exercise the same degree of restraint they did for Dead City, where they were only used to generate more chaos, not become the conflict. Isabelle is a healthy addition to the franchise and a source of relative stability to aid Daryl in his restoration. Laurent was perfectly fine here and is essentially the plot device, but does possess his own agency, being rather intelligent and humble in his approach, which could work for the story later on. The acting was excellent with everyone putting in the work, and whilst I didn't recognise anyone beyond Daryl and Isabelle, I have hope to see them expand into more Western productions one day, as the actor behind Cadron holds a certain presence that makes you pay attention and could work really well for shows and movies like The Punisher and Batman. The exclusion of known characters didn't hinder this as much as I thought it might, as the intrigue surrounding Daryl and everyone else that he interacts with distracts you long enough to forget that this is even part of the same universe. The ideas conveyed in this were very obvious, but unless you know the history to Daryl and everything that he's experienced throughout the duration of the shows, this one will go over your head, as there's a lot of rich subtextual beats that are poured into this already. And overall, The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon is off to become one of the stronger additions to come from this universe of storytelling, getting ready to place its flag on the mountain, but the question is, how far up will it be by the end? Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like this, be sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe for more like this down the road, and until next week everyone, take care, and I'll catch you later.